heard you were at the wedding of the Emperor's cousin, in solitude. Gods, that must have been horrible.
Have you ever hated someone so much you just wanted to bite off his eyes? That's when you know you hate a man. I mean really, really hate him. You can punch someone in the throat. You can even make them wear your dagger like a hat. But nothing is as raw and as pure as using your teeth. And you don't know what it's like. You don't have the hate in your heart. Good for you, but that ain't me. Gabriel. Just saying his name makes me want to take a pair of hot pliers and twist off his nose. He's a snitch. Told the guards about the bandits I used to run with before he hired me. But even after I served my time, he's had them toss me in the dungeon on some trumped up charge. Now he's got the whole city thinking I'm some killer. And if you say something enough times, people start believing it's true. We used to be friends. I thought we were brothers. When he snitched to the god, he became something else. Even a rat's death is too good for him. I want to hook my hands into the corner of his mouth and tear off his face from his skull. As if the gods need a reason to beat down an Argonian. Of course, a little gold always helps grease the wheels, and Gabriel's fingers are covered in grease. That I won't do. The docks are my home. Besides, I'll take 1,000 nights in the dungeons before I'd give him the pleasure. I'd rip off his ears. Just tear them right off. I wouldn't even need a knife. He has a thing for one of the guards. She has a thing for me. But that ain't a good reason why. Because there ain't no good reason for what he's done. But what he's done, it's reason enough for what I'll do to him. I'm going to nail his hand to the table, and then bend back his thumbs until they pop right off. I'll press my elbow against his throat, get real close so he can smell the stink on my breath. And then I'll chew off his eyes like a couple of hard-boiled eggs. Because I can't. Doesn't matter if I have an alibi. Everyone would know who really did it. What can I do? If I tried to hide my rage, I'd probably lose my mind. So I just think about all the things I could do to that little snitch if I could. I'd have him bite the end of a table, and I'd slam my warhammer into the back of his skull. I'd nick off a section of his skin, just a small piece, enough to grip it between my finger and my thumb. Then I'd peel it off slowly, savoring every inch of his skin tearing off bone. Blessing? You mean like a priest? Talos. Now I know you're crazy. Talos spirit and a bloody lizard? Alright. I guess it couldn't hurt my reputation. People seeing me as a priest of bloody Talos. Here, have it. You're bloody blessed.
traveler. It's not often we get visitors this far up the mountainside, but I'm sure Vachlokmir is pleased to have the company. Vachlokmir is not a pet. If anything, I am his. Oh, do you speak dragon? How wonderful! Maybe that will get Vachlokmir talking. He's very loyal, but very shy. To the north, in the forest of Falkreath, I was tracking an elk with hoofprints as big as the white stag of legend. I meandered through the forest, my eyes fixated on the dirt, when I found the track stamped over by a much larger print. As I ran my fingers across the edges, a long shadow crept over my body, and it wasn't until then that I took my eyes off the ground. I shrieked so loud that the birds and the cicadas fled from the trees. Suddenly, I was face to face with an actual dragon. Once I was all out of screams and all out of breath, I realized I was still alive. That's when I noticed the arrow lodged into his wing. He doesn't like it when I say so, but Vachlokmir is very sensitive. The wound was minor, but I knew he needed my help. So I reached for an old hunter's salve I had in my satchel, and I decided to heal him. It kindles my heart to know that there are those who judge not by fear and rumor, but by truth and honor. Vachlokmir did no more than grunt when I dug my hands into his scales and climbed up his great back. I maneuvered his spine, grabbing fangs of rock that jutted from his skin. The arrow was right there, near the crook where his body met his wing. I clutched the arrow by the fletchings, yanking it out with all my strength. Too much strength. The force of it made me lose my balance. I would have fell to the ground and croaked my skull, if Vachlokmir didn't swivel his head around to catch me. But even after I applied the poultice and the healing spell, Vachlokmir was in no condition to fly. Mentally, anyway. And it wasn't long before some of the other hunter folk came stumbling through in search of prey. There were two of them, dressed in scale armor, with bright silver coins of light shining off their chest plates. When I heard their voices laughing through the trees, I dove into the thickest of grass and lay in wait, my dagger clenched between my teeth. The hunters, meanwhile, drew their weapons, their eyes mesmerized by the great beast that lay wounded before them. Most would have fled at the sight of Vachlokmir, but when the dragon covered at the sight of them, it only gave them courage. A hunter seeks every advantage, which is why he traps animals he aims to kill. Yet these folk sought to murder, not to hunt. When the hunters came, Vachlokmir curled up his head and tail, hiding under the canopy of wings. He was so teeny. The hunters laughed as they split up to flank him. Slaying a dragon was great prestige. Nobody would ever believe it wasn't. I pulled the dagger from my teeth and watched as the shorter one circled toward me. I could practically smell the stink hopping off his force. I rose to a crouch and raised my arms to his throat. When my nose betrayed me, I sneezed. Both hunters turned toward me, but I managed to get the short one. All I felt was the rush and the hot spray of blood trickling down my leg. My body was on fire, but I was scared. Perhaps Vachlokmir sensed this, because as the other hunter charged, he unfurled his wings and let out a roar. The sky shook and the earth cracked, and the man flaked like no man I've ever seen. But I reckoned he'd be back, maybe with the city guard. We had to hide, although the hardest part was convincing Vachlokmir he could still fly. Maybe I shouldn't have told you what a covert Vahlokmir is. Or maybe I was lying to throw you off. I wish it weren't so, but folk are scared. And Skyrim, when it comes to fear, everyone's merchant, and everyone's buy. The housewife frets and paces, afraid the dragon will swoop down and eat her children or set fire to her home. The city guardsman trains in the barracks, worried all his boasts of heroism will melt away under the heat of a dragon's flame. The farmer picks his crops before they are ripe, and the hunter starves the forest of rabbits and deer. Same goes for blacksmiths, lumberjacks, milk and tavern maids. Every bored, middle-aged, drunken soul who thought they had nothing to live for. Now, all of a sudden, they have something to lose. So entire towns live in fear, leaping to panic every time a cloud drifts over the sun. It's very sad. If only they'd lie down their fear and open their hearts, they'd see that the dragon is capable of mercy and a creature of kindness. The way of the voice sounds mystical, but I think he's fine the way he is. Really? Well, if you're that curious, I'll gladly tell you my story. I was raised in a community of hunters. My mother taught me to track, hunt and skin, and my father taught me how to craft cages and traps. He was so proud when I fashioned my first bear trap. He shoved it to a neighboring hunter, who offered to make a good use of it. A group of hunters had found a bear alcove near the outcroppings by Evergreen Grove. That day, 4 of them left, but only 3 returned. One of them spit at my father as he passed him, then threw my manglet trap to the ground. One of the bears had managed to break free from its jaws. 2 of the hunters blamed my father, and I blamed myself. But one of them, a Northman with a low brow and sad eyes, told me the truth of it. The bear was a mother, driven by her need to protect her cubs. He said not even the fangs of a dragon could have held her. He tossed my hair and gave me a smile more black than white, but it brightened my day all the same. Yes, I realized that every beast has a family. Mothers, fathers, daughters and sons. And our right to hunt is not any more valid than their right to live. Many folk would shy away from a dragon, but it is Vahlokmir who shies from all. I am sorry, but he is not a weapon of war. It is true that Vahlokmir is descended from dragon folk, but this does not make him a god. If Vahlokmir was the one to speak, I am sure he would. But perhaps a gentle nod is good enough? Vahlokmir, what say you? Do you bless this traveler? It seems to have worked. And I think he likes you. Not many folk does he approve. Well, I trust you got what you came for. Goodbye.
Over there. That's the bandit. I couldn't do it, Yori. It was right there in front of me. I begged it to give me courage. Still, it wasn't enough. Just die! Do it. Everything had to be done. Yeah. She's it's not fair to
Thanks
ask
for
a child
having
to
my
slay
back.
her own woman. What are you doing here? It's the name I've given this Nord carving. It helps sometimes, having someone there, even if he isn't real. I was supposed to slay her. The hunters, they said she was killing their own. It was easy for me to track the blood. There was so much of it, and the forest was so angry. I could hear the insects beat their wings like 1,000 tiny drums. When I reached the barrow, I saw something. It was bigger than any creature I'd ever seen. I managed to wound it, but when it came time for the killing blow, I couldn't. Somehow I knew it was still her. So I ran. When I returned, the hunters stormed off into the woods to finish the job. I don't know what they expected of me. I couldn't hurt her. How could anyone? I had to. She was my responsibility. But I couldn't. The hunters, the gods, they gave me a chance to make things right, and I failed them. Do you think she's dead? The roadside ruins. That's where I dropped my bow. If you find it, I'd like it back. But if you forgive me, I pray you don't find anything else. None that bothered to stop. Although there was that Nord from Riften who spent the night. True, and he'd been travelling for a long time, but men like that always have character. He did, but I'm warning you, you won't like how I tell it. Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. The tale I remember best was about his adventure in the Reach. One night it was very dark and cold, and he was frightened. Then, when he felt all was lost, a voice shouted out, "The blood's all below your waist!" No. Wait. That part comes later? Oh, Ifri's bones, I really messed it up, didn't I? Somehow I doubt that. But thanks.
Did you hear that noise? Wonder what it was. I'm not afraid of you. Ah! You are nothing but stupid milk drinker.
That's how a true Nord fights.
Oh. Sorry.
My bow! You found it! And my mother? Do you think she's safe? Listen to me. Worried about her when so many are dead. If you forgive me. When my mother lived in Valenwood, she came across an old tree that made for the perfect home, if not for a single wayward limb. A travelling outsider offered to cut it down, and from the wood he fashioned a bow. Together they would later form a village. It wasn't the best wood, and it isn't much of a bow, but for Mother, it was a piece of home. For me, this bow is a piece of her. I thank you for returning it. If there's anything you need, I will do my best to help. Then this truly must be fate, for you to bring me this bow. I will do as you ask. Alright. As a city elf, this feels a bit odd, but I give you her blessing. And mine. I feel like I need to learn more about my heritage. Stop being a city girl.
Speak quickly. Until next time.
Do you have business with the Dominion? I am Arundel, a Thalmor Justicia and advisor working on behalf of the Aldmeri Dominion. The embassy's role is to entertain the Jarls and collect information. My role is of a more military nature. I advise on minor decrees and local ordinances, and ensure they align with the interests of the Thalmor. Yes, I too found it odd. After traveling to the embassy to settle a dispute, I returned to the headquarters to find it completely deserted. An esteemed Aldmeri dignitary had come to watch a Stormcloak sympathizer lose his head, and as he so eloquently put it, stain his unmentionables. While the execution went swiftly, and the dissident did soil his tunic rather splendidly, this fellow did manage to enact one last measure of revenge. Well, I have watched Artar perform dozens of executions personally, and have yet to witness such a prolific spray of blood. In fact, to call it a spray would do it a disservice. It was a shower of crimson, the majority of which seemed to guide itself uncannily toward our dignitary and his venerated wife. I think she may have even swallowed a healthy portion of the man's blood. These matters require patience and time. In the end, it took nearly 3 days to quell his rage, and 3 more to assuage his distraught wife. Surely you jest. We are the original people, the Aldmer of time immemorial. We are the direct descendants of Elnefey, and superior by birthright. When I deign to follow the custom of the lesser children, it is simply to acknowledge their worth, limited as it may be. True, but there are many aspects that can affect the outcome of a war, and fortune plays a part. Whether it is a war or a duel, the superior fighter does not always strike the first blow. But over time, the difference between the two becomes more and more apparent. While it's true Man and Mer are both descendants of Elnofey, the Elnofey were far from monolithic. Long ago, they had splintered into two groups. The first group is the ancestor of Mer. The second is that of men and, most notably, beasts. Our current form is a representation of one's blood. Would you not agree that the beast races are cousins of the animals of the wild? One does not look at a cat and neglect its similarity to Khajiit, nor does one gaze upon a troll and not turn his thoughts to man. It is therefore an undeniable fact that of the two groups of Elnofey, it is the Aldmer who bear the most resemblance to the gods. How childish. When your argument lacks conviction, use brute force. It is the adult version of a tantrum. My role is far less defined, due to the nature of Solitude's politics. The Jarl, the housecarls, the Empire, and even the bards to some extent influence how the city is ruled. For one, I assist with the crafting of decrees to ensure they have the proper authority to be enforced. The wording must be so that it precludes all forms of sedition, even those that are not immediately apparent. Dissidents have historically used song, metaphor, and irony to circumvent decrees outlawing criticism of their rulers. These have always been effective tools in rousing negative sentiment, because they are often misinterpreted by those in power. Many of them are too arrogant to understand when they are being openly mocked. That is where I come in. It would be a grand opportunity to put my diplomatic skills to the test. Although it's likely I would just be beaten and tortured, as the Nords have yet to develop more sophisticated techniques. If the rebels took over, would it not be prudent for them to have a liaison through which they could submit their threats? My role is to negotiate and interpret the terms of the White Gold Concordat for any Imperials that forget their station. In other words, I carry no sensitive information. I fight the war through facts and analysis. If you're implying this is personal, the Thalmor do not let such petty differences interfere with the mission at hand. They would only abandon me if they believed my existence was a detriment to the cause, but I find that highly improbable. The burden should not be on the educated to diminish their wit. There will be many cultural attributes that will be retained when the Aldmeri rule Tamriel, but ignorance will not be one of them. Certainly, in Hammerfell, where brute force was applied, we made marginal gains at the cost of our own forces. Conversely, by negotiating the ban of Talos worship in Skyrim, we created internal conflict for our adversaries that weakened them from within. That is how diplomacy can be wielded as a weapon. That is how wars are won without a single casualty. Ah, flattery. A tool of both the unctuous and the earnest. The question is, which are you? Or, to put it more simply, what do you really want? If it is a blessing you desire, then you are in the wrong building. Such divinations are performed by priests at the altar. I see. It is without question that I possess an intellect far superior to any mere mortal of the cloth. If all you require is my blessing, then I see no harm in doing so. Nevertheless, I would be remiss if I did not request something in return. I would like to be escorted to the Thalmor embassy. Surely in your company the ruffians outside will not make trouble. Excellent. Let us depart immediately.
Make it quick.
I do not like the selection at Radiant Raiment. It is far too expansive a catalogue, and allow... We have arrived. A pleasant surprise, all things considered. Now to fulfill my part of the bargain. I give you the blessing of Julianos. May his wisdom guide you on your quest. As for myself, I have an urgent meeting with Elenwen I must attend to.
Need something?
Welcome to the Winking Steamer.
Hey, watch it!
Take a load off and enjoy the
I
atmosphere.
didn't mean nothing by it. Just leave me alone.
Hey, sister, you look thirsty. Tell you what, you give me 1,000 gold pieces and I'll buy you a drink. Fair enough. I guess it ain't much of a trade. What if I threw myself into the deal? The choice is as clear as the reasons, sister. Belran likes to say, you can go for a swordsman or a spellcaster, but why not have both? He likes to say that a lot. Why not have both? I'll tell you why. It's like you're out for a meal, you get the choice of pie or fish. Belrand is like a pie made out of fish. Why not have both? That's why. Just the basics, sword and shield. No fancy knight training. What I know, they don't teach you in any tourney. Of course, if one day the bandits all trade their blades for jousting spears, then by all means, find yourself a knight. Otherwise, you're better off paying me. Is that right? Didn't really think about it. Just tried to put a number on what you're getting.
Corvus always says
So, we're in
some
complete
foreigners
agreement.
should take over
Knights
the
are
England.
dumb.
But somehow I think Vinette, the daughter, would make it better in.
I tend to have only happy thoughts. Mostly because I only think about one thing. It's round, gold, and buys me mead. My next opinion of the war will be my first. My only opinions on the dragons is that I don't care. Probably. So is killing men. I'll stick to what I know. It's pretty simple. In this world, you got people who want other people dead. They pay me to kill them. Yeah, it might cost you extra, depending on how dangerous it is. Hell, make it dangerous enough and it might cost you less, but it'll still cost. I have no idea what you just said, but it sounds expensive. 1,500 gold ought to do it. You got yourself a deal. And don't worry, you're getting the better end of it.
So you return. The fire's inside the crypt are lit. The whole thing reeks of my mentor. You, what do you know of the Way of the Nine? It would take decades of training to master. Then you are not as foolish as you appear. The Stands of Arche is a culmination of decades of training. This is all a clever trick on the part of my mentor to get you to believe and to fill me with doubt. There is no doubt my mentor was inspired by his faith. Without the mythology, the Way of the Nine would not exist. But inspiration is not the same as the gods descending to the earth and handing you power. My mentor once believed that every technique required an unwavering belief in the divine for which it was named. At first I played along, if only to extract the knowledge. Yet near the end, it was obvious to even him that I had no interest in fairy tales. You ask me why I think faith plays no role? I am living proof. I mastered 8 techniques without once prostrating myself before an altar. It is only because the 9th escapes me that he clings to the notion that faith is what I lack. Perhaps it was a test. If I was able to learn the Stands of Arche and vanquish him in the process, then it would prove I was right. It's possible he views the outcome as both a reinforcement of his beliefs and a punishment for his wavering faith. Indeed I was. 2 legendary swords, hidden away in the nameless barrow to the north. 2 things of unparalleled edges and durability, masterly crafted, and in my hands. Still, I am not accustomed to their varying weights. I will need to train before I can wield them as they were designed. This means my mentor will have time to conduct whatever foolish rituals he has concocted, and leave him no excuse when I slay him and his pupil. Really? Now that is an interesting twist. Yet if there is justice in this world, that is how this should be settled. Very well. I will wait for you both at Winter's Peak, where Kynareth sheds not a tear. And just to show that I'm not entirely ungrateful, here, a reward for your assistance.
Smells like garlic.
Make it quick.
Contrary to what Savashni told you, the Stance of Arche is not the master technique. It is merely the last step in a staircase of 9. Meaning, it is the knowledge of all 9 stances and
and faith in all 9 divines that grants you the knowledge to be a true master. Worry not, your mind will be clear. You will simply be able to call upon my knowledge and the spirit of those who blessed you, much like a spell. In truth, this is the only way you can utilize the stances without proper training. Now, if you are ready, I would like to begin the ritual. Understood. Then let us proceed. Warriors of the Academy, furious, I call upon your service. We may test this journey and also blaze. Come forth, come all, and with every cut let our minds and our faith be sharpened.
Shoot him. You're a dangerous bastard, aren't you?
Your trial is over, young disciple. Yet you are a disciple no more. You should now be able to summon the way of the Nine. My thoughts and dark gaze will flow to your blades. All that is left is to find my pupil and show her the instant you comes around those who walk around
you've finally come, and come alone. Seems my mentor is either a coward who hides behind his disciple, or a weakling who knows his betters. It matters not. Even in death, he cannot evade my claws. The stance of Arke will be mine. So you say, priest, but I see only a mortal, not a god. Draw your weapon, disciple of Garrett. The time has come to paint the snow in stripes of red.
Yes, we must all show deference to our makers. It is the cardinal mistake of mortals to assume that all achievement is their own doing. By remaining a humble servant and giving yourself to faith, you have achieved more than my pupil ever could. Carry that knowledge with you, and with the divines in your heart, perhaps you may one day wield the way of the Nine without my aid. Until then, I will be at your side, as will the gods. Farewell.